Well, hi, it's my pleasure to be here today with Jim Elliott, the founder and president of Diveheart. And I understand your organization, you're an adaptive scuba nonprofit with a rich history, celebrating a 25th anniversary this year. So I'd love to just start off with talking about the story of how you came to found Diveheart and its mission.
Yeah, well, I didn't have any interest in diving necessarily. I was a journalist in college, and I thought if I ever have to interview someone like Jacques Cousteau, I better know how to scuba dive. So I took diving in junior college, and I was like, oh my God, you're hovering in the Keys above the Christ statue, and you're looking at the surface going, this is like being a superhero. So fell in love with it, decided I wanted to do it. Of course, you get married, you have kids, it takes you in a different direction. But I started guiding and teaching blind skiers in the 80s because my oldest daughter is blind from birth. And I was comfortable around people with disabilities. My dad was a disabled Army vet and stuff. So I kind of dodged wheelchairs at the VA hospital, when I was a kid. But when I got her involved in downhill skiing in the 80s, when I was with WGN Radio, I saw it turn people's lives around, and I thought, this is really powerful. Always thinking this would be a cool thing to do in diving, right? Getting people mainly out of wheelchairs is what I'm thinking. And so after my media career, I finished that. I decided in 97 to start teaching people with disabilities full-time diving, mainly thinking again about physical disabilities, but I don't draw a salary, never have, and the thrill for me is to get somebody out of a wheelchair who's never been in the water before. And of course, as a diver, you teach them how to use their breath, right, to control their buoyancy in the water. And the thrill for me, my payday, is when they stand up in the deep well and they look down and they go, oh my God, I'm standing up. I'm not in my wheelchair anymore. And I'm breathing underwater, which is not natural, right? So those two things are really powerful. And we've done research with university medical centers, and the Illinois School of Psychology actually did a study with people all over the country that had dove with us and said, Jim, the first pool program is the most powerful. And I think it's because it creates a paradigm shift. Now, the first time you stick your face in the water, and if you're an instructor, you know what I'm talking about. You always have somebody who puts their face in the water and goes, I can't do this, and that's the power. Once you get them comfortable with that and they go, I'm breathing underwater, and then they're standing up, that's the payday.
That's incredible. I imagine just seeing that the light bulb come on for those folks must be so rewarding.
Yeah, I think most instructors would say when they see that look in their eye, their students' eyes, and that they get it, that's really the payday.
Well, I would love to hear, stories or any anecdotes that come to mind that have been particularly rewarding from your time at Diveheart. I know one we talked about a little bit briefly before this was your story about the veteran and the Christ Redeemer, the Christ of the Abyss statue. I think the audience would love to hear that one.
Yeah, I couldn't believe it. I'm teaching blind veterans at Hines VA Hospital in Maywood, Illinois. And this one blind veteran goes, I've been diving since the 50s. I go, why am I certifying you now? And he goes, well, in the 50s, you didn't need certification. I go, you're right. That was bootleg diving, right? So I gave that to him. Then he goes, I brought the Christ statue here in the 60s. I go, you mean the Christ of the Abyss, like the most viewed underwater object in the world in Key Largo, Florida, that Christ statue? He goes, yeah. I go, now I know you're full of it. He brings in these black and white photos then, the next time I see him, with him as a young man standing near Navy Pier in Chicago with this wooden crate with this 9-foot Christ statue there behind him. I'm like, oh my God, this guy brought the Christ statue here. Well, he was an Army vet. And back what was going on, you had the Cuban Missile Crisis, and they were trying to get the statue down to Key Largo. So they put it in a National Guard armory hangar at O'Hare Airport for months, and then they found a Navy plane to finally take it to Key Largo, or Key West, actually, and it sat in a warehouse in Key West until they figured out where to put it. Well, Gabriel Spataro, the guy who brought it here from Italy for free, that's a whole nother story. It's in the documentary, right, The Legend of the Statue. But he gets busy with his family Italian restaurant in Chicago. So he forgets about it. Fast forward to 2013 now, I've trained him. He's certified. He's dove with veterans in Cozumel and stuff like that with us on a grant from Department of Veterans Affairs. But I'm driving him home. He used to make balloon animals. So I'm like, he says, Jim, you're not going to believe it. I'm diving the Christ statue. I go, well, you brought it here in the 60s. You probably dove it a bunch of times because you were diving since the 50s, right? He goes, I never dove it. He goes, I got busy with the restaurant, blah, blah, blah. So I go, well, who are you diving with? He goes, I'm diving with my buddy Vinny, who's got one leg, who's also in his 70s. And then I'm diving with my buddy Louie. I go, well, who's taking you out? What vendor's going to take these three guys with disabilities out? He goes, Finney's got like this 25-foot fishing boat. I go, time out. I go, stop. I called DJ Wood, who owns Rainbow Reef, who's very, very good to us. I go, DJ, you're not going to believe this story. And DJ says, oh my God. So he cleared 8 paid spots on a Saturday to have Gabe's team on the boat, and we had 20 people on a chase boat. I've never seen that many GoPros and cameras underwater in my life. Made the cover of the Miami Herald. You know, it was amazing, and it actually changed the archive for the Miami Herald because they had the statue coming into New York. And the reason is the ring buoy that was sitting in the photo at Navy Pier by the Christ statue had a New York on it. Well, you would think, no, it came into New York, but it was a New York Italian shipping line that brought it into Navy Pier. But they put the ring buoy out there. So, and then the archivist at Miami Herald said, oh my God, we have to change our records. I go, yeah, you do. So it was a great story if you get a chance to see it.
Absolutely. Well, I'm sure viewers will be interested to watch it as well. And I believe they can find it on the
YouTube,
website.
Yeah. YouTube. Actually, if you go to Diveheart YouTube channel, it's a great resource. You click playlist, you get military stories, you get stories on autism and scuba therapy, on spinal cord injuries, documentaries. This one is under military and under documentaries, this Legend of the Statue. Symposiums. We've had doctors from, Northwestern University. We present the Mayo Clinic every year. So we try to, I knew this was therapeutic when I first did it. The first time I was in the water, I go, oh my God, this is amazing. So we constantly were harassing physical therapy professors and occupational therapy and rehab docs all over the world, really, to get them to embrace this. And now they do, which is awesome. So we have 11 years of symposiums. So if you ever have, and you can't go to fall asleep at night, insomnia, just turn on a symposium and watch it, and listen to all the medical, background on scuba therapy and the benefits and stuff like that. It's really cool.
Well, I understand too that, your training and working with your divers probably looks quite a bit different in some cases than a traditional open water or discover scuba diving class. And you mentioned you're kind of have developed your own training curriculum. I would be interested to hear about that process and, what an adaptive diver coming into diving, how you all might work with them.
Yeah, we don't see disabilities, first of all. We see abilities. So if you're a quadriplegic, we see what you can do or can't do. Some have some movement. Those are incomplete quads. And then what we do is that determines what kind of team you get. So this is all team-based diving. So if you're a buddy, we train you up and we do empathy training. We make you pretend you're blind, para-quad, all that, and do this crazy, task loading stuff, right? But then we also do some land clinics. Like we introduce you to things like full face masks. So some of your divers may not use regulators. So we use a full face mask and we orient you not only to put it on yourself, but to put it on someone else, and how to do emergency protocols. If you're underwater and a high pressure hose blows, what do? That mask now has no air. So we carry 6-foot hoses with us with quick disconnects, and we'll pop yours off, pop ours on. Now you're up breathing off of our tank. So if you have enough of those in the water with somebody who needs a mask. So those are the kinds of things we've kind of pioneered in our program. But it basically is team diving. So if you're a high-functioning paraplegic, you could almost be open water, but not quite. You would have 2 buddies that are highly trained. If you were a quadriplegic, you would have 3 buddies. If you had special needs, if you needed a full face mask, or some people are not audible, right? That they're maybe have autism on the spectrum and they can't communicate verbally, but they communicate with eye blinks or hand gestures. But maybe that therapist is the only one that really understands that. So we train them up to be a buddy, and they get in the water with the person. And so that's special additional needs that you have as an adaptive diver. We don't call them handicapped or disabled. We call them all adaptive divers. And eventually they just want to be known as divers.
For a diver or someone who's a dive professional interested in getting involved, they hear the mission and want to be a part of it, how would they go about working with Diveheart or becoming a buddy?
Oh, I love talking to people that want to get involved. So the phone number, from the office, 964-1983, is 630 area code. That goes right to me. And then what I do is I figure out who you are, what you want to be, what your expectations are, what your interests are, what you do for a living. And then what we do is we plug you in. Maybe you go right to training. Maybe it's research. Maybe you want to set up something and present. have us present to, your grand rounds at Duke University, which we've done, to hyperbaric physicians. And so it depends. We kind of fit you in. But, just right now, it's like drinking from a water hose. Really, there's so much interest in adaptive scuba now, 25 years in, that we're just taking it in and getting it to the right people. We have instructor trainers all over the world that now can, one of our biggest programs is in Malaysia. I thought when I started this in Downers Grove, just west of Chicago, it was going to be a little local thing. And now we're like China, Australia, Israel, all over the world. We've presented and trained and stuff. So, just good, diveheart.org is our website, and it's easy to find. If you search my name, I searched my name. It was crazy. I went Jim Elliott Diveheart, and I went, oh my God! And I saw all this stuff come up on me. I'm like, I had no idea all this stuff is out there, but it's crazy how easy it is to find stuff now.
Mm-hmm. And I understand you have some new projects coming up. One of them being the deep pool, right, which is fascinating and would be, I believe, based in in the Chicago area where you are. So just interested to hear a bit more about that. The goals of the project. It sounds like a massive undertaking, but has garnered some great support already.
It's been a process, not an event, as they say. and it started with us being interested in doing a 40-foot pool like the Neutral Buoyancy Lab at the Johnson Space Center. And then doctors from Hopkins did a study and said, Jim, if you go to 66 feet, there's this extra output of serotonin. 80% of the PTSD symptoms are alleviated. Well, this is at a time when there were no deep pools. I mean, Nemo 33 in Brussels was 33 meters deep, but it wasn't 130 feet. Mm-hmm. So we said, well, let's scrap the 40-foot pool. Let's go to 130. No one has done it yet. And so we just started down that process. It took 6 years. We got 3 patents on the design. It's like we have an opportunity to do this because we have people who have reached out to us just in the last few months that said, $300 million is reasonable for a project. 3 pools, geothermal, solar, net zero facility, cutting edge research, rehab, education, training, vocational stuff, tech diving. We're hoping we can bring into this if we make it deep enough. Right now our specs go to 150 feet. We've danced with some people who thought we could do it, but now we've scrapped 12 acres that were donated to us near Great Lakes Naval Base, and we basically are moving to a much larger piece of property 30 minutes from here and Midway Airport, 2 international airports, because this will be a worldwide destination, we believe, and our partners believe that too. So they want to help us get this thing done, and maybe this is the template that will be the first, and there'll be others. We're praying.
It's incredible. What a way to, you're already massive impact to really just, for lack of a better word, deepening that and really making it have the global reach as a destination. That's an incredible goal. I'm excited to see it come together.
And one of the things that's unique about it is on the patent, the deep pools in the world are all the same. They're all based on Nemo 33's footprint, mm-hmm. which is a couple levels and then a tube. Tube ice case, the tube probably goes down over 150 feet. Well, I dove Y40, right? And you could maybe put 20 people in that diameter. Well, you can't put 20 here and 20 here and 20 here because if there's an emergency here, boom, right? Mm-hmm. So our pool goes up and out. So every atmosphere, there's a 10-foot ledge. So 99, 66, 33. And you could put teams of 4, so a quadriplegic and 3 other divers, every 15 or 20 feet apart, all the way around the perimeter. Because it telescopes out, you can go safely to the surface with no overhead interference, as long as everybody stays in their lane. Mm-hmm. But yeah, they can go right to the surface. You could do research at 20 feet, at 30 feet. You could use 100% O2 at safe depths. Mm-hmm. You can go to pharmaceutical companies and go, we know what your drug does at 1 atmosphere, AbbVie or Abbott or whoever. What does it do at 2 atmospheres on 50% O2? What does it do? You know what I mean? And now the person's not in a chair, so you get extra oxygenation of tissues, circulation, range of motion, all sorts of benefits. I didn't know that bladder integrity was a thing. Well, we have to pee when we go diving, right? A lot of times in wetsuits. So I had no idea the benefit that it provided somebody who's in a wheelchair all day. But it makes sense. Now their body's elongated and stuff. So we're hoping that, we can attract pharmaceutical companies to say, let's do some research. Let's find out what your drug does at 2 atmospheres or 3 or 4 or whatever. And and we're thinking that aerospace is going to like this too. The Neutral Buoyancy Lab is only 40 foot deep, right? Mm-hmm. And technical diving, and if we can get it deep enough, it may be the deepest technical diving rehab diving pool in the world. So that's kind of keep your fingers crossed.
Wonderful. It was fascinating looking at the design model of it that you showed. So just as another question, I know I did touch on for people who are divers and are interested in your mission and getting involved. For anyone who might be listening to this or know someone in their lives like this who, they maybe have a different ability and then they're interested in diving and wondering whether it's for them, questioning whether they might be able to do so safely. What, advice would you give them? Where should they look, reaching out to you all or?
We've created, with David Marsh as filmmaker, we've created a library on YouTube, which is unprecedented. There's nothing like it in the world. You hit playlist and you go, like I said, to veteran stories or spinal cord injury stories or autism, and you find something that resonates with you. So like if you're with a VA hospital and you want to get something going, I go, before we meet, before you ask me questions, go to YouTube, click on the military playlist. There's over 20 stories there about PTSD, about spinal cord injuries, about traumatic brain injuries, about learn a little bit. And then when you come to me, you'll ask the right questions because you'll get it on a level that you won't get it. And that's regardless of what your ability is. I mean, if you're a wheelchair user or if you have a TBI or if you're, an Olympic athlete, it doesn't matter. And people can help us just by being ambassadors. I mean, autism is an epidemic in our country, in the world, really. So, I mean, if you know a family with somebody with autism, go through the autism stories and go, oh my God, this would resonate with Jane's family because, they have somebody with autism in their family. Do that and share that because that's how the word gets out. That's how this grows. It's sharing stories is how it grows. Mm-hmm. So that's what I would say. Go to YouTube. Diveheart YouTube channel.
You mentioned your history of working with folks in skiing. And I'm wondering what is unique about diving that makes it so therapeutic or so rewarding to these folks?
Like I mentioned earlier, I have guided and taught blind skiers from the mid-'80s to about 2013, and then Diveheart just consumed my life. I got so busy. But the thing I like to compare with diving and skiing is with people with disabilities is it takes me 2 days to get a blind person acclimated to the equipment, tactily, because they have to feel it, right? And then how to initiate turns, and then eventually how to follow commands down the hill, because it's alpine skiing, it's downhill skiing, right? It's not cross country. And it's left turn, right turn, that kind of stuff. But it takes me 2 days. But 30 minutes, I can get somebody who's never been in the water out of their wheelchair, teach them how to use their breathing and how to control their buoyancy. We take care of the weighting and all the equipment and all that. We're right there to adjust stuff, power inflate or whatever we need to do. But the thrill is in 30 minutes, they're standing in the deep well looking down going, oh my God, I'm standing up. I'm not in my wheelchair. And I'm breathing underwater, which is not supposed to be doing either. So that is like the big payday, the turnaround for me is that's how I would compare them, is it takes a lot longer and it's a lot colder when you're skiing. I like to be in warm water. I've done tons of training in quarries, but yeah, it's nice to be in warm water. And people with thermal regulation issues, which people with spinal cord injuries have, people who are mobility impaired. So if you're in a chair or walker or whatever, and you're not moving, like somebody like an athlete would, that you get circulation issues and stuff. So getting in cold water is an issue. So yes, you have dry suits and semi-dries and all these things you can jam them into, but to be in warm water really is important. And that's why the pool we talked about, we want to make it geothermal and bring up warm, energy so that we can make that water in that pool really warm. Like, for example, one of our instructor trainers in Utah uses the crater, and out west, you probably know the crater, 96 degrees all year long. Kind of indoors, like under a mountain kind of thing. It's like wild. You walk in, it's like, wow, a lake. And yeah, so she, Robin Knight is one of our greatest producers because she goes right from the pool right into an open water scenario, which is 96 degrees. So she doesn't even have to put people in wetsuits. Mm-hmm. So it's very, very productive that way.
I imagine with warm water as well, I know seems like the therapeutic benefits extend to pain relief for people who may suffer from chronic pain. Mm-hmm. Just interested to hear about the research you might have done or anecdotal experiences with folks who've struggled with chronic pain who've really had a positive experience with diving.
Yeah, on the technical end of the benefits of scuba therapy, I would recommend people go to our playlist. It's symposiums and listen to professionals, listen to doctors and therapists and talk about the benefits that they've seen. What we see in a practical sense is if we're going to Cozumel, like we'll take 50 divers in Cozumel, 12 will have disabilities. That's only 12 divers you're serving, right? Which is why we want to build a pool to be able to scale up and serve more people. But day 2, like clockwork, people roll up to us in their wheelchairs going, Jim, I've been in chronic pain for like 15 years. This is the first time I've been pain-free since my injury. And I just say, get in line now. I go, this is experience. We've seen this so many times. It's unbelievable. And under our veterans playlist on YouTube, you'll hear, not only disabled divers with disabilities, but you'll hear buddies who are veterans themselves struggling maybe with PTSD or mild traumatic brain injuries, but they're able-bodied enough to be able to be a buddy to a quadriplegic, for example. And they'll talk about the calming effects of diving and stuff like this, and how it gets them in the zone, and there's no surface distractions. And that kind of leads me to the autism side of what we do. We did the first research on autism and scuba therapy with Midwestern University, and we know that with autism, pressure blankets, pressure vests and weighted blankets are part of therapy, right? That tactile stuff they need sometimes. Plus, sensory deprivation rooms are part of therapy. Get them away from all the triggers, right? And that's true with PTSD too, the surface triggers. So what we do is when you get underwater, number one, you eliminate all of the traditional triggers, right? You don't have the same sounds and stuff like that. The ambient pressure is therapeutic. So just that feeling, the wetsuits sometimes can be therapeutic. However, there are kids with autism or people with autism that don't want a wetsuit on at all. So each one is very subjective, right? That tactile, that pressure is soothing for some and not for others. But we found that getting them underwater eliminates surface distractions, and the pressure helps. And the cool factor is off the charts. I mean, now socially, they're a diver. You know what I mean? Now they can show video and pictures to their friends and family and neighbors and coworkers. And it's like, oh yeah, I'm a diver. You're a diver. Wait a minute, And it's like, yeah, that's really, really cool. So it helps them find value in themselves and purpose, and that's a big part of what we do is help them, find value and purpose. And so with autism, if they can now be part of a family, we've, on our autism playlist, again, we've got Christina has a great story where her parents are part of this profile we've done on Christina and autism, and they're talking about, we don't even know who our daughter is anymore. She gets up in the morning on her own. She gets her gear together. She goes down and says, oh, stay in bed, Mom and Dad. It's like, who is this kid? And the dad just says right in this video that we did, he said, this is the best therapy my daughter has ever had. And that's what we want to see replicated times 1 million or 10 million or whatever. Just get them in the water. The pool is a lot of times enough for some people. We have some people that only do the pool. That's really where the heavy lifting is done with Diveheart, is getting them in the pool. Some only come to pool sessions. They may never come on a trip. They're welcome to, but sometimes that can be daunting for somebody depending on how severe their disability is. So it's all challenged by choice. Mm-hmm. You know what I mean? You take it as far as you want to, and we try to be empathetic and understand and aid you, help you with what you need, and leave you alone when you don't, not leave you alone, but don't get involved. Don't always take a knee, for example. If you're in a wheelchair, I always get on a knee the second I meet somebody with a disability. It's a great way to meet someone, and they're not wheelchair bound. You know what I mean? They're not handicapped. They're wheelchair users. They're adaptive divers. And you give them respect.
What would be a few other ways? Because I know the language we use is important when referring to individuals with varying abilities. For someone who might be, at a dive site or at a pool, around or working with, or just even meeting, divers with differing abilities, what advice would you give to make sure they're, conveying the proper respect and meeting people on their level?
That's a really good question. We address that in our training, of course, but we deal with basically two types of people that are born with disabilities, like my daughter who's blind, who may be told their entire life that they can't do stuff. Oh, you're blind, you can't do that. You're in a wheelchair, you can't do that. So they have this belief they can't do things. So when they discover that they can dive, it's like, oh my God, this is amazing. Then there's someone who suffers a traumatic injury, a veteran, an athlete, someone that gets in a car crash. You're no longer the person you were. Now there's loss. Right now there's depression. Now there's anger that they're dealing with. And helping them overcome that is no small feat. Trying to get them to, you're not a therapist, but you are a therapist in some ways. Just challenge by choice, helping them meet these new challenges and say, it's okay. It's not a race. Take your time, but you're dealing with different issues. I'm told my whole life I can't do something. I'm no longer the man I was or woman I was. I'm less than. And you're not. They're invisible disabilities, right? So somebody walking up with a cane or somebody rolling up in a wheelchair, you're going to identify them as somebody with special needs, right? But there's a lot of people with PTSD, with autism on the spectrum, with maybe comorbidities, like maybe you have mild cerebral palsy and it affects the way you walk a little bit, but otherwise you present yourself as an able-bodied person, right? But they don't realize that cognitively you're processing things different. You might have short-term memory loss. I had a young man with a traumatic brain injury. One of my dive masters said, I've shown him this like 16 times. Why doesn't he get it? I go, look it. This is what you signed up for. You might have to say it 6,000 times. He has a short-term memory loss. He is not going to remember. He'll remember stuff he did when he was a kid, but he won't remember what you told him 10 minutes ago. So you just have to have infinite patience and stuff. And when I would talk to dive operators and professionals or anyone working with people with disabilities, is we have a slate that adaptive diver profile slate. So we sit down as a team and everyone gets to know Johnny and what his needs are, right? What he can and can't do and how he wants to be transferred into the water or whatever. But then you have to do that with somebody who doesn't present themselves as having a disability. So all of a sudden it's like, you have to let the crew know. You have to let the staff know at the hotel that we have 6 people with autism or PTSD. There's certain things we need to be aware of, right? I've had captains go, this kid's not listening to me. I'm like, dude, he's on the spectrum. When your voice goes up, you might be freaking him out, right? And he just freezes, right? So that's natural for him to do. You just have to be aware that he has to be approached differently. And we have some people in our organization that are like autism whisperers, man. They come in and who do you want to put with this kid? Glenn. He's the guy. His son has autism. He knows how to get him out and bring him in to the zone that he needs to be in. But being aware of that is huge. Just awareness that don't just jump into this thinking you're doing your average open water dive person. You're dealing with somebody that may have physical, may have cognitive, may have both issues going on with them, and you have to be sensitive to that and try to address it. That's why the training is like so important. I mean, nobody's going to jump into this and get it right away. Some people may be more intuitive than others.
So Diveheart really seems to harness the power of storytelling to share all of the incredible stories of people whose lives have been changed through your work. And I also know you have quite a bit of, longer form filmmaking as well in several projects. So definitely would love to hear more about those.
Yeah, being a journalist, right, I always believe that stories stick, right? And it's easier for me to share stories on YouTube than it is to have you call me or walk into the office and me try to explain everything that we do. So stories are very important, right? I was recruited out of college by the Chicago Tribune, WGN Radio, TV, newspaper, and stuff. And I've used everything that I've learned in media to help get Diveheart started. I don't know how I would have done it. And timing was good too with the internet and all that stuff. So we were blessed enough, and I believe there's no chance meetings. And in 21, our first trip out of COVID was to Cozumel. We were training instructors at Dive Paradise. And on our boat, because there was only a couple of us, was David Marsh, this filmmaker. He overheard us talking, staying at the same hotel, came up to us at night. We're working on our laptops. He goes, tell me more about Diveheart. So we do. He goes, I want to do a documentary. I go, cool. So, people say stuff all the time, right? So a month goes by, 2 months go by, and I don't hear from him. I think, okay, this guy forgot about us. All of a sudden he calls, he goes, I really want to do this documentary. I go, okay, great. Well, here's 50 people going on this trip. Here's the backstories on the 12 people with disabilities. So he's doing all the backstories, interviewing, getting photos. I'm a Navy vet, this and that. All of a sudden, we get to a week before the trip. And this is the documentary Adapting to Dive. And it's not a spoiler alert, but a week before the trip, it's Thanksgiving. His son gets out of rehab, comes to the home. Kumbaya, wonderful dinner, love you. Kid goes to his room, overdoses, and dies. So a week before the trip, where he has to do his documentary on Diveheart, his son dies. And his family just said, apparently getting out of rehab was not a new thing for him. Said, look it, don't go down a rabbit hole of depression. Go to Diveheart, do what you're supposed to do, help those people. Now I'm getting emotional. Tell their story, right? So he does. But the interesting thing about this documentary is he doesn't say anything to anyone. He's rooming with his brother. We have 2 boats. They have a camera on each boat. And so every morning, what we didn't know it was David Marsh was getting up and turning the camera on himself and saying, trust. Today's theme is trust. I interviewed these people and they talked about how they had trust, the Diveheart buddies, because to get them out of their wheelchair, to get them to the transom, to get them back on the boat, to keep them safe underwater. And I have to trust now, he said, because I have to trust to go on without my son. And then the next day it might be adapting. I have to adapt now. So it really became this incredibly powerful thing. And we found out that his son had died the last night. The one thing we do with Diveheart is the very first day we do a go-round. And so if there's 50 people, it takes time. But we go, what brought you here? What brought you here? Blah, blah, blah. They talk as much or as little as they want. It takes time. But now I know who's in the room. Now I know who our adaptive divers are, who our instructors are, who has had people history. We find out about people who have someone with a disability in their family for years. No one knew it. I train Navy SEALs here in Coronado. They're sitting in class going, I had no idea that you had a dad with polio or something like that. It was crazy. So anyway, the last night we do a go around too. By then it's kumbaya. We're all family and hugging and all that stuff and exchanging numbers, forever friends. And David is the last one to speak and goes, I didn't tell you this, but Thanksgiving. And he told us a story about how his son died and stuff like that. Well, tears were running down everyone's eyes in the video and stuff. But it's very powerful. And then I brought him on to do 10 more trips and personally sponsored him to come and do profiles. So we have between 50 and 100 profiles on divers with autism and Down syndrome and you name it. And then, of course, the legend of the statue about how the Christ statue got there. Well, he gets a hold of a book that I wrote years ago with a colleague from the Chicago Tribune. This colleague had cancer, and I said to her, what's on your bucket list? And she said, well, I'd like to write a book. I said, well, I got a story, right? So we get together for 2 years and we write this story called Sharing Air. And it's basically Romeo meets Juliet in an adaptive scuba class. So they meet all these people with disabilities in this class and they fall in love. But what people don't know is Romeo's a billionaire and the only way he can unlock his inheritance is to participate in this charity. And then Juliet is dying of cancer and no one knows that either. Of course, there's discovery, right? And you learn all the background. And basically the cool thing about what we do with this film called Sharing Air, which is not out yet, is we took divers and we made them actors, and we took actors and we made them divers. And we did bring on some heavies from, not Tom Cruise heavy, but actors that are in some movies. Mike Markoff is in The Hitman, and it was cool because we were able to get Mike, and he said, well, we need a Juliet. And he goes, well, my wife's an actress. And they auditioned together, and David said, oh my God, they're perfect. And then we had a guy that was going to be Jonathan Strong, who's a character that runs the adaptive dive program. And that was going to be the guy who did the voice for the Sonic Hedgehog. Oh, that's great. He's got like 1 million followers, right? Well, something happens with, he's got to go take care of business, family business. So Mike's brother is an actor, Jason. So all of a sudden, it's like, oh my God, we got like husband, wife, and brother from Hollywood that can do this. And oh my God, we just did a screening, critical screening Wednesday, and it's like it all just came together perfectly. And we finally got it down to around 2 hours. So hopefully it'll be, and we're looking at the Sundance route, and film festival route, but we're also hoping that we can find the Netflix guy who says, oh, forget about the film festivals. Let's just put it right on streaming or whatever, so that's kind of what we're hoping for. But this is the first film ever that's, to my knowledge, that's been done on adaptive scuba in this format. So we're very excited about that. We think that 25 years, we've kind of brought it to a point where we could tell this story in a, fictional, way, even though a lot of it's real. And we do have people with real disabilities in the film. We have a young man who's a quadriplegic with a spinal cord injury. We have another gentleman in a wheelchair who is a Air Force pilot, a spinal cord injury. Now he's a doctor. He's actually last year he presented at Mayo Clinic for us about the benefits of scuba therapy in his case study. And then we have a blind diver. And actually the book I wrote, Sharing Air, with Kathy, who unfortunately is no longer with us, my colleague from the Tribune, Dan was the character in my mind for the book. And when we were casting, I said, well, Dan is a diver. We certified him. So we called Dan. He goes, I'd love to be in a movie. So Dan is blind, clearly blind when you see him visually. And so we have a blind diver and 2 divers who are wheelchair users. And then we have some divers that pretend they have MS. And there's a lot of things going on. You got cancer and you got all sorts of stuff. Mm-hmm. So,
goodness. Well, that's something certainly we're all going to look forward to, Sharing Air.
Yeah.
Sounds incredible. I'm wondering, on set and in general, just safety measures. I know you mentioned it's all team diving. Mm-hmm. Just would love to hear more about specific safety protocols, how you balance the wonderful work with making sure that everyone is safe doing so.
Yeah, this movie was a challenge because we went to Rainbow Reef and DJ and his team were very helpful, and it's beautiful when you put a mask on underwater and wetsuits. Sometimes you can't tell who's in the water, so we actually had instructors in the water on the film portraying other people in the water. So safety is the key. And we sent down, I couldn't go down to be part of the filming because I had 2 retinal surgeries. So last 6 months, Thursday was the first time I got in the plane. But yeah, I sent down instructors just to make sure everybody was safe. That was the key thing. And the way we framed it, it worked out really well. We did some of the stuff at Jules Undersea Lodge that were very good to us. And Fraser Nivens, award-winning videographer, Discovery Channel, National Geographic. He was our underwater video guy. And so he was there. And Dick Rakowski was in it, who a lot of people know in the dive industry, who is kind of like the father of nitrox and the pioneer in hyperbaric medicine. So it was funny. We're here in November here in Florida doing, site surveys and casting and stuff. And we go to the chamber where Dick Rakowski is. And we talk to him and go, Dick, we think we'd like to have you in this film, in March. So this is November. And Dave Marsh goes, don't die before March. So, and Dick was good. He didn't die. And he's in the film forever. So, yeah.
Oh, so many wonderful stories. And I'm just excited to personally delve more into Diveheart and Mission and all the wonderful work you have out there video-wise. And I'm sure the DAN members listening will be too. Is there anything else you'd like to share or cover today? I know we've talked about the mission, film projects, what's new for Diveheart with the deep pool.
Yeah, I look forward to doing more with Dan researchers. We've talked over the years about things. Alan Brilski just did a piece on us and about traveling with disabilities, and he's a renowned author in the industry. So and then William Klein has been very good to us and helping us get the word out about the film and other things. So really sharing stories is huge. Getting involved as an ambassador. You don't have to be in a market where we have an instructor necessarily to be able to share the story. And let's say you want to go diving and there's no one near you. That's fine. I'm a Rotarian. So let's get the Rotary Club to help fund training and a trip and get them to get you here. If you're a military person, maybe there's a VFW or an American Legion or an AMVETS. We've had them all at different times sponsor veterans programs that we've done. So that's another way to do it. There's people in the community that want to support someone, on this journey, whether they have a disability or whether they're an instructor or a buddy, that maybe they can't afford to do everything they would like to do to help, but with a little bit of help from the local Rotary Club, maybe they could go on that trip to Key Largo, train up with our instructor trainer, and get it all together, and then come on a trip and help people in their community. That's the whole thing. We want to get this to be a community thing, because really, in my mind, this isn't even about scuba diving. This is about taking really the unrealized human potential that exists in people with disabilities and create a paradigm shift. So now it's not Johnny in a wheelchair. Right now it's Johnny, the scuba diver. He self-identifies as a diver. And then he goes out and affects people in his community and his family and stuff. And what happens is it creates a ripple effect. And I've seen it where all of a sudden people who don't know, like with my daughter in skiing, I had people I worked with at WGN Radio would come up to me and go, Jim, I was afraid to try this in my life until I saw your daughter skiing. And it's like, if she can ski and she's blind, I could do this. It's like a no-brainer, right? And we all know people sitting on the couch going, oh, woe is me. I can't do this. I can't do that. I can't, life's against me with stuff. But this ripple effect inspires them. So when you see somebody with no arms and no legs that's a diver, you're like, I really kind of don't have an excuse to do anything. So I dig that throwdown. It's like, hey, you know what? She's got no arms and no legs. I think you can do something, in your life. So that's kind of the fun part of it too.
And it just sounds like the impact is so wide reaching. I know you mentioned, all the way in Malaysia and all across the United States. So just to give listeners a sense of the scale and the impact, I would be curious to know how many, instructors you have, or the number of participants, just any numbers you might have to give us the sense of what a big, all the work that you do.
Sure. Well, there's a big market out there. So, Diveheart at 25 years in is about growing and inspiring and promoting adaptive scuba. So we have helped start up over 50 nonprofits around the country that do similar stuff to us. And when we start one over here, guess what? All that money that used to come to us through donations now go to that local nonprofit that we helped start up. But they're doing Diveheart training, so that works for us. And well, I started teaching people with disabilities in 97, and I told Drew Richardson, as the CEO of PADI, I said, my very first certification that I used for people with disabilities was the PADI Scuba Diver certification, because if I couldn't put somebody in an open water card, I would certify them as a scuba diver if I felt comfortable that they could dive with a dive master or an instructor anywhere in the world. So they're traveling solo, and they go to Bora Bora, and it's like, if I don't trust that they can go with anybody, then I won't give them that certification. But that was my first one. So somebody with a mild disability that couldn't or didn't finish the open water training, I would go to scuba diver. So between doing that before Diveheart and then training with the Handicapped Scuba Association, and I was an animal. I would stay at your house, sleep on your couch, eat leftovers, and fly from San Francisco to Oregon, and then go from Oregon to Key Largo, and I just was always on the road and stuff like that. But consequently, have trained thousands of instructors and buddies, and to keep track of how many buddies and instructors that my people I've trained. Is when I think about it, it's like kind of mind-boggling, right? It's like I started a nonprofit over here, and maybe they're doing something that's not Diveheart necessarily, but that's fine. We promote, we refer people to them, we support them as well. But it's like, how many have they trained? How many people have they? We don't have the wherewithal to monitor or account for all of those things. But I know personally, I've trained thousands of buddies and instructors and adaptive divers around the world.
It's incredible to think about the ripple effect of all the individuals whose lives you've touched, and then the participants as well. And, I'm sure the long-lasting impact on them and their families. So just thank you for all the work that you do. It's been wonderful learning more about the mission, and I'm sure folks listening to will be really excited to delve into those stories. So thank you for your time today, Jim.
Thanks for sharing. Appreciate it.
Thank you.